And hi there. Before you try to power through your stress, what if you just took a moment to notice what's actually going on in your mind? In this episode, we're kicking off a 4-part series with a very powerful and often overlooked tool for burnout and stress relief. This is a very simple tool. It's free, and it might just change how you see everything. So let's get into it. Welcome to Burnout Solutions, a podcast designed to help high achievers and healthcare professionals understand stress and how it can lead to burnout. Together, we'll explore how your brain and nervous system naturally work and why they sometimes hold you back, and how to overcome those challenges to fully enjoy the success you've worked so hard to create. I am your host, Mona Tippett, registered nurse, burnout coach, and resiliency educator. Hello, and welcome back to Burnout Solutions. This is a podcast made specifically for those of us who are helpers, who are healers, who are high achievers, and for anyone who is tired of pushing through and ready to work differently. And today I am totally excited for this episode. And we are really going to introduce a tool that has helped me and many of my clients really work differently and see things just a little bit different. And I'm excited to have Micah Murdoch here with me. He is a life coach who went to the coach firm with me, and we both help people with stress and burnout. And I just want Micah to introduce himself.
Thanks, Mona. It's good to be here with you. I'm really excited to be part of this as well. I think we've got a very informative session today, and we've got some good tools to talk about. My background is primarily in education. I've been in education in different settings for the past 20 years, in the classroom, as an instructional designer, as an administrator. Currently work for a private online university now in their innovation lab. And I've been coaching for the last 3 years, and I've really enjoyed having an opportunity to work with clients, to work with fellow coaches like yourself, and to dig into some of the stuff that's really plaguing our society. I've had a lot of experience of my own with burnout and the stress that comes from it. And this awesome curriculum and some of these tools have been super helpful to me as well. So looking forward to talking to other people about that.
Yes, awesome. And I have mentioned in past podcasts that teachers and parents, as well as healthcare workers, really can suffer from stress and burnout in very similar ways. And I thought, I need Micah with all of his experience, with his burnout, with his education. And we are both parents. And so we're both experts in managing the fun stress and burnout that parenting can give. So we are going to talk about all 3 areas today: healthcare, teachers, and parenting. And specifically, I want to talk about how a lot of us feel like maybe it's our job or our lack of support or our spouse's problem or the administration's problem or the school district's problem. And that is why I am feeling pressure and burned out and stress. And today we want to introduce maybe a different thought, that it could be something different. And I guess, Micah, I want to ask a question to you. If it were only the environment, wouldn't everybody react the exact same way? And what are your thoughts about maybe how it could be something besides the environment that stresses us out?
Yeah. So I think that's an interesting question, because I think you're getting onto something. Most people would agree that, well, we all react differently to our environments. And so that plays into what stresses one person out may or may not stress another person out. Now, with that being said, that's not to say that our environment can be really challenging or not really challenging, right? There are some school districts,
Right.
some children, some
Areas.
environments of our
Yeah.
life that make it much more difficult. But there are some who seem to be able to accelerate or even thrive under those conditions, and others who don't. And one reason, it's not the only reason, but one reason that might be true is because of our perceptions of that environment. So I absolutely think that our perception of what is going on around us plays a huge role. Now, with that also being said, I don't want to make this claim of any kind that when we're talking about stress and burnout, that's different than, say, clinical depression or anxiety or some of these other things that are like mental health concerns that require a different response. So this is not us saying, oh, if you're feeling depressed, you can think your way out of it and be happy. But on the other hand, if you're just feeling burned out and you feel like this stress or burnout is starting to create issues in other areas of your life besides maybe just the one that's creating that, then I do think this is a really powerful tool and a really interesting conversation around how we perceive our environment and what we can do to control what we think is happening around us, even when we can't control the things around us in our environment.
Yes. And I love that because I talk about that a lot in my other podcasts about how when we are dysregulated or when we are around dysregulated people, we dysregulate ourselves. And so our perception could be taken from dysregulated people in an environment where we're all just dysregulated. And so I just love that bringing some awareness to our perception of our workplace or our home life can help maybe see things differently.
For sure.
In my forward-facing training, we talked a lot about Viktor Frankl. And if you're not familiar with him, he was a Holocaust survivor, a psychiatrist. He was the one who wrote the book, Man's Search for Meaning. And we use his work a lot. And he said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response is our growth and our freedom. And I really love that we have freedom when we can choose our response, and how a lot of us work on default or thinking patterns or behavior patterns. And sometimes we say, that's just who I am, or this is out of my control. And we feel like a victim in those situations. And what I love about the power of changing our perception is that it helps us enlarge that space. It helps us see things differently. And we can become a more proactive player in our life. Also, Dr. Gentry, who was my mentor, I love his burnout definition. He says, burnout is the chronic condition of our perceived demands outweigh our perceived resources. And I see that a lot in different situations. Just like you said, some people thrive in certain environments where other people are stressed. And what stresses me out wouldn't stress you out, and vice versa. And so when we perceive that our demands really do outweigh our resources, that can really start to stress us out and lead to burnout, which can...
Sorry, you want to
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask a quick question then? So we're talking about things that our perception and our ability to have some control over the perceptions we have. What are some of the things that shape that perception from your experience? How do we know and understand what those influences are over our perceptions?
Yes, a lot of our perceptions actually come from our nervous system blueprint. And that is, there's a whole episode on that, but really our nervous system is constantly picking up cues in our environment 12 times per second from what we are seeing, what we're feeling, what we're tasting. So it's people's eye roll or their posture or the side eye, like my girls like to call it. And we have learned in the past what a side eye means about me. When people roll their eyes, we create a perception or an experience about what that means. And over time, we have hundreds, thousands, even tens of thousands of experiences with other humans. And if I experienced something in third grade in the spelling bee where I messed up and kids laughed at me, and my nervous system recorded, when people laugh at you, when you make a mistake, that means that there's something wrong with you. And fast forward 30 years, and maybe I'm in a room with other nurses and I make a mistake and they laugh or roll their eyes. All of those experiences in the past that have told me when I make a mistake, something is wrong, all of that comes in the present moment. And so I experience stress. I experience a perception that people are thinking something about me, whether or not that is right or wrong. That's left up to debate. But there are things over time that add up and our nervous system remembers. And I call it past painful learning in my past podcasts. I'm sure there are other things, though. What can you think about, Micah, that can also shape our perceptions?
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about how we have these experiences, and what those experiences do is they create belief systems inside of us, right? And
Mm,
it can create beliefs and fears and negative responses based on the experience that we have. So as a child, maybe when we're very emotionally mature, we're underdeveloped, we don't really know much about the world, we're creating our reality based on our experiences. And if we have a wonderful nurturing family and good educational experiences and friends that love us, then we're probably going to create a lot of really healthy belief systems about ourselves, and maybe we have minimal fears.
yeah.
But if we don't, which quite frankly, that's pretty rare to have all of those things happening, all right? Maybe we've got a loving,
Sure.
but we've got terrible friends or people at school that bully us, or maybe we've got teachers that just traumatize us. Maybe we just experience trauma in our family for whatever reason, regardless of whether they love us or not.
Right.
So we, over time, these experiences create these beliefs about ourselves. And often that also leads to certain types of fears. And if we're not cognizant of those, or don't at least become cognizant of those as we mature emotionally and physically, then they can rule our lives, and they can create environments that continue that fear and continue those painful experiences indefinitely. So it can create additional stress that now
Yeah.
we ourselves are responsible for, more so than our environment, or at least we have environmental cues or stimuli that we could prevent being
Hmm.
stressful to us, but that because of our past beliefs and fears, it continues to cause pain and concern and stress, and eventually maybe leading to burnout and things like that.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. And that's what we help clients
That's
with all the
right.
time, right?
Exactly.
Is helping them see maybe what in their past is contributing to the stressful situation. And I think about when I was a nurse working labor and delivery, it was one of my first jobs. And I had this fear of sleeping in and showing up late to work. And it was so ridiculous because even though I was never late, I always had this paranoia of being late. And I think it came from one experience when I was in junior high and I slept in and missed the bus. And of course, on that day, my parents had something major planned, and it was a super inconvenience for them to drive me to school. And kind of in the back of my mind, I just always thought, I cannot sleep in. It's not good. And now, as a parent, I totally understand the frustration of having to rearrange your morning. I just felt, especially with this new job, that I wanted to show up on time. And every single night before I had a shift, I had this constant thought in my head that I would sleep through my alarm. And looking back, it was so ridiculous because I never slept in. I would show up on time every time because I was so paranoid that I would be late. And this is just an irrational fear that I had.
Sure. Yeah. And me just thinking back on my experience in education and with teachers, boy, it's so easy to just think of all the ways in which these kinds of stressors can affect a teacher. You've got a classroom full of 30 plus kids, all of which come with their own baggage, their own experiences, their own willingness to comply or not. You've got parents on top of that can come in and make things much more stressful. You got administrators, test standards, all of those kinds of things. So on any given day, you could be juggling all or many of those things. And that environment feels incredibly difficult to manage because there's so many factors that are completely out of your control. And so we have to bring that back to what is it that we can control, specifically in that profession as a teacher. And often I can see that being true, obviously, for a nurse, the same kind of thing,
Yeah.
right? There's so many factors out of your
Uh-huh.
control. And then just bringing it back to parenting, like, of the exact same kinds of ideas, right? We're trying to manage a household, whether you have one kid or five kids, or whether you've got teenagers or infants or toddlers or whatever. Even if they're all moved out, I've got kids that have left the home, and I thought, oh, my parenting will be minimal with these children that are married of their own and out of the house. And I think I talked to them more than I did when they were living in my home because they need so much help. So the parenting
Right.
never
Yes.
stops. There's this constant pull in the back of your mind for the concern and the love that you have for these kids and wanting to have the best for them. And it's a really tough cognitive load to have to bear constantly. So even with parenting,
Oh,
it
yeah.
doesn't ever end.
For sure. And I just think about what stresses me out versus my husband and maybe different kids. I hate to say this, but kids, like, in their phases, I'm better able to stay regulated and be more patient and loving and kind with that child, whereas I swear, like, every other year, it flip-flops with between my husband and I, who's the better one to be patient and loving and kind,
Right.
and the other one needs to step out or take a break or,
To do the
um,
tag team
just
impact,
something
right?
like that. Yes, yes, and that's, again, another example about how it's not the child, it's not the situation, but it's our personal interpretation of that.
Yeah. Perception of the environment is really a huge part of all that.
Yeah. So let's talk about how we can actually shift our perception and use the tool that we learned about in life coach school. Micah, do you want to introduce it?
Sure. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about, and we're going to do a series. I don't know that we mentioned that, but we're doing several of these co hosted
Oh, yeah.
podcasts, and we're going to talk about three different tools through one in each podcast. Today, this one, we're going to talk about the mindful release. And the mindful release is something that helps bring awareness to some of the internal narratives that shape our stress and shape our perceptions. To give you an official definition, a mindful release is the practice of writing or speaking your thoughts. And the key here is you do it unfiltered and uncensored. And the purpose for that is to help your awareness.
Mhm.
You've probably heard this before. This isn't like a mind blowing concept of this idea of your ideas down or speaking them out. Talk therapy has been around for a really long time. And I think that's one of the primary benefits of it is it gives you somebody that you can talk to. And just in the event of
Mhm.
talking in and of itself can be really helpful. But the mindful release does something that's a little bit more intentional than just writing out pages and pages of content or just getting on the phone with a friend or even a therapist and just talking, because there's those two components to it that are really important. It needs to be unfiltered and uncensored. In other words, you need to be, if you're talking to somebody,
Yeah.
it needs to be somebody who can handle that communication, right? It's probably not going to be the person you're having a problem with. We're not suggesting you go and talk to your
Uh-huh.
husband about being
Right.
uncensored or unfiltered if he's the one that's causing your issues. But it's this idea of being able to get these thoughts out without having to curb what you're saying or thinking, and then to do it for an increased awareness. So there's a specific intent, a purpose for it. It's for the purpose of being aware
Right.
of the thoughts that are going on inside of your mind. You know what?
So it's not just journaling.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? It's not just writing a journal. We actually have a purpose and a reason to be doing this.
That's good. Yeah. So you might want to, for instance, for myself, and this is before I even knew anything about specifically the mindful release, but for years and years, I've always like talked out loud in my car while I'm driving. If I'm alone, especially, I'll be driving around. And if you were to like look at me from another car from the other lane, you'd probably be like, who's that weirdo over there? Just having this whole conversation by himself.
Huh?
Maybe he's on the phone or something. I don't know. But I would do this. This was therapeutic for me. I would just, and oftentimes, and I'm not suggesting that it should be crass or violent or like any of that kind of thing. When we talk about uncensored, it's just this idea of being purely true. Dig into what you're really thinking. Communicate out loud or in writing the truest, most authentic form of yourself, whether it's an issue that you have with a relationship
Yeah.
or with your job in this case, or whatever is causing the burnout, of just being authentic enough and courageous enough. And it's funny because you wouldn't think if you're just talking to yourself or writing something that no one would ever read, that it matters that you would be afraid to admit something that's true, right? Like you wouldn't think that would be very hard, but I have found
Mhm.
sometimes where I have said something and been like, I can't believe I said that, because that goes, maybe you thought you were this way and then you say something and you know that's true about yourself and you realize that it's not as black and white as you thought. You're not quite as straight of a line as you may think. So sometimes these conversations that you have with yourself or the things you write out are truly revealing of your own soul and your own authentic self in a way that it takes courage to do that. And I think that's an important part
Yeah.
of this exercise.
Oh, for sure. I totally agree with you. I like to think about it as if I'm cleaning out a junk drawer or cleaning out my closet. There's just clothes everywhere, there's shoes everywhere. I can't walk 2 feet without tripping, and when I can clear it up, put things where it goes, when I can even just empty my closet as I'm changing seasons, get rid of things that I don't need, and that's how I like to see a mindful release, is it's just a time where we're writing down all of our thoughts. We're getting those thoughts out onto paper and creating more of a space so that we can identify our thoughts and see if they are helpful or not. And we're not going to talk about how to change our thoughts in this episode, but we are going to talk about the benefits of just getting those thoughts out. And I'll just give a few. The first is from a nervous system perspective, is that it physiologically shifts our brain from fight or flight, which is the emotional center of the brain. And this is where we spiral. This is where we think, oh, I'll show them. This is where we think, oh, I should have said this. And then she would have said this and I would have said this. We create these pretend situations that we wish we would have done. And it gets us from that emotional spirally part of our brain, brings us back to our prefrontal cortex, which is the logical part of our brain. It's a part of our brain that actually can solve a problem. It's the creative part. It's the compassionate and loving part. It's I'm not getting hijacked by my emotions when my logical brain is online. So we create a space. We can also think on purpose. We're clearing out the junk. And then do you want to talk about watching? Like just what we can briefly do once we write out our mindful
Yeah.
release?
So the watcher is also another concept from the mindful method taught by the coach firm that talks about this idea that it's basically us watching us, right? Like me watching myself, me
Mhm.
becoming the observer of my own thoughts, and
Mm.
curiosity and a compassion perspective, not a judgmental perspective. That's a really key part of being the watcher. If you find yourself saying I should have, then you're judging yourself,
Yeah.
and I've heard
Yeah.
often, don't should on yourself. Like that is something that's don't the
Yes.
condemnation and the judgment only adds more layers of pain to something that's probably already painful.
Right.
So the watcher is a curious, compassionate observer of our own thoughts. And when we're doing a mindful release, there are often times where we can come up with a discovery of two opposing thoughts that are
Oh,
causing this
yes.
this conflict,
Yes.
right? The pain comes from dissonance within ourselves, which interestingly enough, dissonance is actually considered a more advanced emotional maturity than not. Like black and white thinking is a
Mm.
more immature look. It's a more childlike perspective on the
Yes.
world.
Childish
Yeah,
perspective.
so
Uh-huh.
when we get older, we realize the world's not so black and white, and sometimes what we thought was absolutely 100% true, we find variations of gray. And so when we start realizing that we've adopted belief systems that are dissonant within our own selves, that can create some painful realizations and some need to transition or to change or to just be able to be aware that we're holding two conflicting thoughts the same time. And what do we do with that? Like sometimes
And
that's something that's part of our journey of trying to understanding. This mindful release process can sometimes uncover some of these unknown dissonant thoughts and two opposing things that we believe both at the same time. And if we can realize and recognize with compassion and curiosity that this is true about ourselves rather than being judgmental or shameful about that towards ourselves, then we can often release some of that stress, some of the burnout, and some of the pain related to some of those emotions and feelings that we have.
yeah, I love that. And I am going to throw in here that Micah is an amazing video creator, and he actually created a little video that we use in the Mindful Method, and it talks about the watcher. And we are going to include a link to that at the end of our show notes that goes into just a little bit more depth if you'd like to look at that. So let's just move on and just talk about some like examples or some scenarios when we would do a mindful release and maybe even some questions, which we're also going to include is just a little PDF download of some thought-provoking questions that you could ask yourself to start a mindful release, because have noticed sometimes with my clients, if I just say, "Write it down," they don't really know, "What do I write about?" And part of this, again, is that it's purposeful and we're writing something down to help get out those thoughts, and then we're going to use those thoughts later to, first of all, understand our perception and how we can shift it. But some of the questions are, what are you struggling with right now? What went wrong last week? What difficult emotions did you experience last week? What are you worried about? What's the problem that you're having? And why is there something that scares you right now? And what do you wish were different in your life? What do you wish were different with your coworkers or with your students or with fifth period
Yeah.
or with the specific situation with your child? Or I think of a nurse. Sometimes I've come home and thought, man, I did not give that patient what they wanted. They were really unsatisfied. I wish I would have had more time. I wish I would have had more support and help. And those are the kinds of things that we write about, is what do you wish could have happened if you would have redone things? And it also, I think, helps to maybe do these mindful releases at a specific time to maybe help you prep or decompress after a situation. Micah, I know with teachers, I'm sure there's really helpful times during the day that this could be used. Do you have any ideas
Sure. Yeah, for
or
sure. Every teacher has a different schedule and a different approach to the way they manage their classrooms. And with respect to that, these don't need to take long, right? Mona just mentioned several
right?
questions that are good prompt starters. You could create your own, maybe you have your own, but those are ones you can rely on. But as you're thinking about this, having a prompt that works good for you in advance helps, so that you don't have to sit there and try to
Mhm.
question, do I want to answer right now? But once, assuming that you have that, teachers can do this but whenever you've got a little bit of time, and all the teachers are there are snickery like, "Time, right, that's
We
something."
don't have
Like, I
time.
ever got time. But just think like maybe during a prep period, take 5 or 10 minutes and type it up on a computer, write it on a pad, just sit there and maybe talk through it if you want to, if you do that. If you're like me, I've mentioned how I talk in the car. I'm a verbal processor. And so the talking out loud tends to be the most effective for me, but I know not everyone's like that. And sometimes writing something down, maybe a caution would just be to be sure if you do write any of this down, that it's, first of all, it's not intended to be something you like keep in a notebook or something you like refer back to. This isn't intended to be something that's like
Yeah.
a documentation over time of all of your mindful releases, because I think that often would inhibit your ability to be uncensored and unfiltered, right? If you know that this is like cumulative of all of these thoughts,
Or that someone's going to
or
read
that
it.
someone else might find it and call you out, put it online somewhere, post it on Facebook, and then you're fired the next year. Something crazy like that, right? So whatever you're doing,
Yes. And
go ahead.
also, like, we don't write this down. If I'm super mad at my husband or a coworker, it's not something we write down and then show it to them. This is just something for us to see where we're coming from.
Correct. And so we're not
Go ahead.
encouraging,
Keep
verbal abuse of any kind by being unfiltered and then being like, see what I think about you. Like that would be a version of this. So this is an internal process. Again, for teachers thinking about your prep period as you're reviewing or prepping for a lesson plan that you may be writing, maybe before sending an email to a parent, before a parent teacher conference, in the teacher's
yeah.
lounge for any reason, just taking your quick, I know sometimes lunch breaks is another kind of thing. Yeah,
While you're eating lunch,
I'm
yes.
eating lunch while I'm doing my lesson plan, while I'm listening to somebody on a phone. Like you're doing all three at once. Pure and total acknowledgement of the lack of time. Just be understanding that this may not doesn't require a lot of time. And when you do it, it frees up cognitive capacity to move on. It's like, it's
Yes.
another thing that maybe you could compare it to. Oftentimes, maybe you'll get this like this to-do list in your mind about all the things you're going to do on Saturday. And over the course of the week, you're like, okay, I need to do that. But you just have it in your head and it bounces around in your head and it feels really overwhelming. It starts getting really burdensome because you're thinking of all these things.
Mm.
Finally get to the point where you're like, oh, I just got to write this down. And you write it down and you realize there's only three things in your mind
Yeah.
because you weren't that intentional about it. It feels, because you have to continually remember what you're trying to do, it takes
Yes.
up more space than it needs to. But once you get it out of your head, you can move away and say, okay, I've got that off my chest. It's out of my head. And now I can put my cognitive attention towards something else. And mindful release can play a similar role where you've got all these complaints,
Yeah.
these stress, these things that are growing or spiraling in your mind because they're a big deal. But once you get it out and you realize, okay, well, it felt super overwhelming and kind of was burning me out, but now it feels a little bit more manageable because I can see it for what it is, and it's not quite taking up as much energy and space in my mind as it was before. So those are some thoughts about how teachers
Yes.
might be able to use this.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. I think of Stephen Covey. Wasn't he the one that says we need to take time to sharpen the saw? And this is one of those tools where we are sharpening the saw because we are creating that space, like we talked about earlier. We're creating that space to have more intentional thoughts. Our logical brain can solve the problems. We can be creative. We can do what we need to because we've gotten it all out of our mind and now we can sift through it and look through it. And with healthcare workers, I was thinking about this. This is a really good way to debrief after a shift. Again, in the break room while you're eating, while your pager's right next to you, or the call button's always going off. But this is a time that you can just really quickly, briefly write something down, even before a staff meeting or after a staff meeting, if it didn't go as well as you thought, or even with care conferences and meeting with other professionals, planning a patient's care and working with parents and other departments. This is a really good time to work on that. And I think, Micah, both of us as parents, when have you found this helpful?
Every day.
At the end of the day, every day, right? Yes, a notebook by my bed. I like to go on walks. You like to go on drives. It's, yeah, a good way to just talk out loud. I have also done this before I've had a conversation with one of my children about maybe an issue that we're facing, whether it be curfew or cleaning the house or something. It has helped me to get it all out on paper because that helps also get the emotion out. And then I show up better
Yeah.
after I've done this. I'm more of an intentional parent. I'm more who I am because I don't have those thoughts swirling around. And I can communicate better with my child to the point, and it's not doesn't turn into this rambling long lecture for an
Right.
hour. It because I got all of those thoughts down on paper.
Yeah. And just referring back to what I was saying a minute ago about how sometimes the mindful release can give you a chance to uncover some of your own stuff, right? Like other things that maybe you hadn't read about yourself. As a parent, like obviously want to show up as our best self to parent a child. And there have been times when I've realized that I wasn't quite as right as I thought I was. And so it gives you a chance to be
Mhm.
like, as a parent, maybe your child's got a point, or maybe, this thing that you felt you were like on your high horse about, I'm going to ground you,
Yes.
or like, you're in trouble and I can't believe you did that.
It's because I'm the
That's
mom.
right. Because I said so, because I'm the parent, right? Like those aren't our best moments as a parent normally, but we can give like a chance as we're putting this mindful release down or as we're talking it out. We can, one of the questions maybe you ask yourself is, what's my child's perspective on this? Like, where are they coming from?
Mhm.
What might they think?
Yeah,
And if you can really get into that and see that, perhaps you're going to come with more compassion, more empathy, more curiosity, and all of those things, and things just go better, right? Maybe you actually strengthen the bond with
yeah,
your child instead of create this barrier between the two of you in a moment of conflict.
yeah,
And of course, that could be true for a spouse as well in regards to that. So there's so many ways when we're talking about Viktor Frankl's give yourself a space so that you can respond
uh-huh,
in a way that you want to respond. And again, we're going to talk more a bit about this in future episodes when it comes to the
yeah,
action
how to apply
on all
it,
this.
how to
But I think those are some things that you can be aware of. The value of the mindful release provides all of this rich data about what's going on inside of you that you can then do lots of other things with that will help you show up in the best way you can.
yeah, I love that. I love that. Let's just recap what we've talked about and maybe offer a challenge to our listeners. Do you wanna do that,
Sure.
Micah?
Yeah. So the challenge we're offering might be pretty obvious, but it's basically do it, right? Do a mindful release. Take a
Yeah,
problem that's feeling kind of,
try it out.
yeah, do it. There's something that's feeling gnarly. and say, this is the thing. And maybe don't do the first mindful release with the biggest problem in your life. Maybe there's something that's just really massive, but pick something that seems a little more manageable, something that's nagging you, or something that maybe you're like, "Ah, I'm close to resolving this, but I don't quite know what to do." And take a minute. And if you can only think of the biggest thing that's in your life, that
Yeah.
maybe that's okay to start with that too. But do a mindful release, find
Yeah.
something from maybe last week or something recent so it's fresh in your memory, and do that. Maybe go for a walk and just talk it out. Go for a drive like I do. Write it out, find a journal and write down the content, or just jump on your laptop or your phone and type it out, and to destroy
Yeah.
it, to delete it, to burn it. That's why I like to speak verbally. Maybe that's part of it too, is because there's no evidence of some things that I've said when I'm all alone and I'm in my car shouting at, whoever it is that I'm frustrated with
Yeah.
in the moment. But that's the challenge: is pick a challenge, an issue that you're dealing with right now from recent memory, and do a mindful release with intention of kind of following these principles, and see what your experience is like for that.
Yeah. Awesome. I love that. And we will attach a list of questions if you need primer to get you thinking and to writing about that you can find, as well as the video that talks a little bit more in detail about being the watcher of your thoughts. And you can find all of that in the show notes. But just in closing, we want you to know that you are not alone in feeling the weight of caring for other people, whether it be teachers, caring for students, and having the weight of administration and parents behind you, and healthcare workers with the same thing. You're dealing with families, you're dealing with people in pain, you're dealing with people who, shocker, don't want to be at the hospital. And we understand that. And we also understand the weight of being a parent. This is a job we can never leave. And it's a 24/7. And a lot of us have two of these, in air quotes, careers at the same time. We just want you to know that when we do mindful releases, it can help us get out our perception. And we're going to talk about in the future how we can see our perception now and look at it with compassion and curiosity. And then in the future, we're going to talk about how we can maybe start to change that perception so it can work for us and not against us, so it can help alleviate our stress instead of add to it, so that we can show up with more purpose and be more deliberate in our life. And I did want to say that your thoughts are powerful, but you are even more powerful. And to learn to be the boss of your brain, to learn to be a more intentional version of yourself. And this is a huge tool that we have found is helpful in our personal lives, professional lives, and with our clients.
Like,
So, thanks, Micah, for joining me today. We will have another episode next week about how to analyze your perception and start to tweak it.
thanks, Mona.
Yep.
It's been good being on your show, and I'm looking forward to our next show as well. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank
Mhm.
you. Thank you for listening. And if you know a teacher or a healthcare worker or a parent, if you could share this episode with them, that would be fantastic. And I would really appreciate it. Also, make sure you check our show notes for the freebies that we mentioned with the mindful release and the video about the watcher. We'll see you soon.